Something very strange is happening inside the American right, and almost nobody in mainstream politics wants to discuss it honestly. For 20 years after September 11th, large parts of the conservative movement in America treated Islam as the great enemy of Western civilization. The rhetoric was relentless. Islam was supposedly incompatible with democracy, freedom, women's rights, modern society, everything. Now suddenly some of the same online circles are openly praising Islam. Not quietly, openly. Young MAGA influencers talk about Muslim societies as stronger, more masculine, more disciplined, more family-oriented, and more resistant to what they call Western decadence. Think about how bizarre this is historically. A movement that once defined itself through fear of Islam now has influencers converting to Islam. What happened? The answer has very little to do with theology and almost everything to do with the psychological collapse of confidence inside the modern West. This story actually became personal for me years ago. I remember sitting at a family lunch while one of my sons started defending Jordan Peterson. Not fanatically, calmly, thoughtfully, and I remember feeling uncomfortable because I suddenly realized that young men were searching for something. Not necessarily politics, not even religion, structure, meaning, identity, direction. Back then, the online masculine rebellion was still relatively intellectual. Peterson talked about responsibility, discipline, mythology, purpose. But internet culture evolved very fast. The algorithms pushed everything further. Self-help became anti-feminism. Anti-feminism became civilizational panic. Civilizational panic became obsession with demographic decline, masculinity, and cultural collapse. And eventually, some young Western men started looking at conservative Muslim societies and saying something shocking. At least they still believe in something. That is the key to understanding this entire phenomenon. These young men are not really studying Islam deeply. Most know almost nothing about Islamic philosophy or history. What they admire is the image of certainty. They look at the modern West and see confusion, falling birth rates, loneliness, weak communities, declining religion, endless culture wars, young men without direction, families collapsing, politics turning into chaos. Then they look at conservative Muslim societies and imagine the opposite. Strong families, clear gender roles, religious confidence, social cohesion, men who seem certain about their identity. Now, whether that perception is accurate is another question entirely. Many Muslim societies are deeply modernized, capitalist, globalized, and internally divided. But online politics does not operate through nuance. It operates through symbolism. Islam becomes symbolic resistance against liberal modernity. And honestly, Europe understands this phenomenon better than America does. Because Europe has been living with demographic anxiety and cultural pessimism for decades. Recently in Portugal, I sat in a taxi listening to a driver angrily complain about Roma families and immigrants having many children while real Portuguese people disappear. So I asked him a simple question. How many children do you have? One, he answered. That moment explained the entire contradiction consuming parts of the modern right. Many Western societies fear demographic decline while resenting the groups still having children. They celebrate traditional family values while having fewer and fewer families themselves. Underneath the anger sits something deeper: fear, fear of decline, fear of replacement, fear of irrelevance, fear that the West no longer believes in itself. And this is where the conversation becomes dangerous. Because increasingly, parts of the online right now argue that empathy itself is weakness. Compassion is weakness. Tolerance is weakness. Pluralism is weakness. Think about how radical that shift really is. For centuries, Christianity at least claimed ideals based on mercy, humility, forgiveness, and care for the vulnerable. Now parts of the populist right openly admire harder and more authoritarian moral systems because they associate kindness with civilizational collapse. That is why some of them suddenly find conservative Islam attractive. Not because they stopped being nationalists, not because they became theologians, but because they are searching desperately for strength in a civilization they increasingly see as exhausted. And perhaps that is the most disturbing part of this entire story. The real crisis is not Islam. The real crisis is that many young Western men no longer believe their own civilization offers them meaning, dignity, or a future. That is why these strange ideological alliances are appearing. When civilizations lose confidence in themselves, people start searching everywhere else for symbols of certainty. And right now, that search is transforming the politics of the Western world in ways almost nobody predicted 10 years ago. If you enjoyed this analysis, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and visit westernrelations.com for more deep analysis on the political and cultural transformation of the Western world. Thank you for watching.